They dared a black single father to sleep with his boss for a cheap laugh after work. A bet. A joke. A trap dressed up as locker room humor. But when East Walker knocked on Kara Mitchell's office door that night and told her the truth, she didn't flinch. She didn't fire him. She didn't even look surprised. She just leaned back in her chair, studied his face like she'd been waiting for this exact moment, and said 5 words that turned everything upside down. About time you showed up. Before we dive deeper into East's story, I'd love to know, where are you listening from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you're new here, consider subscribing so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, this story is just getting started. East Walker had spent 6 months learning how to disappear in plain sight. The headquarters of Whitmore and Associates towered over downtown Chicago like a glass cathedral to corporate ambition. East walked through its marble lobby every morning, swiped his contractor badge at the security gate, and rode the elevator to the 12th floor without making eye contact with anyone. He had perfected the art of being present, but unseen, useful, but forgettable. It was safer that way. He was 35 years old, a single father, and the only black environmental contractor on a floor full of white executives who looked right through him. His job was to complete the sustainability audit for their new construction project, collect his paycheck, and go home to his daughter. Nothing more. Nothing less. Serena was waiting for him every evening at the after-school program, her backpack too big for her small frame, her smile too bright for the fluorescent lighting of the pickup area. She was 8 years old and the center of his entire universe. One Thursday night, while East sat on the living room floor braiding her hair, Serena tilted her head back and looked up at him with curious eyes. "Daddy, how come you never tell me stories about work?" East kept his hands moving gentle and steady. "What kind of stories?" "Like funny ones. Mia's dad tells her about his crazy boss and the time someone microwaved fish in the break room and everyone got mad." East smiled despite himself. "My work isn't that exciting, baby girl." "But don't you have any friends there? Anyone you eat lunch with?" The question landed harder than she intended. East thought about the break room on the 12th floor, the clusters of employees who went quiet when he walked in, the polite nods that never turned into conversations. "Work friends are different from real friends," he said carefully. "You know what my real job is?" Serena scrunched her nose. "Saving the planet." "That's part of it." He finished the braid and turned her around to face him. "But my most important job is picking you up on time every single day. Everything else is just details." She seemed satisfied with that answer. East wished he could feel the same way. The truth was, he had learned to keep his distance from everyone at Whitmore and Associates, but one person made that discipline harder than it should have been. Kara Mitchell. She was the senior vice president of operations, the woman who had signed off on his contract, and the reason East made sure to take the stairs whenever he saw her waiting for the elevator. Kara was in her late 30s, with auburn hair she wore pulled back in a way that made her look perpetually ready for battle. She commanded every room she entered without raising her voice, and East had watched her dismantle a project manager's entire presentation with nothing but 3 quiet questions. She terrified most people. East wasn't terrified. He was careful. There was a difference. A black contractor getting too friendly with a white female executive was a story that wrote itself, and East had no intention of becoming a cautionary tale. So he kept his head down, submitted his reports on time, and pretended not to notice when Kara's gaze lingered on him during project meetings. He told himself he was imagining it. What East didn't know was that Kara Mitchell noticed everything. She noticed how he arrived 15 minutes early every morning and left exactly at 5 o'clock, never staying for the after-work drinks that the rest of the team used for networking. She noticed how he helped the cleaning staff pick up a cart of supplies they'd dropped in the hallway one evening, even though no one else in the corridor bothered to stop. She noticed how he ate lunch alone in the stairwell instead of the break room, and how he called someone every day at noon, his voice dropping to a softness that didn't match his reserved demeanor. Kara had spent 20 years climbing the corporate ladder by reading people, and East Walker was the most interesting thing she'd read in a long time. She didn't approach him. She didn't make her interest known. She simply watched and waited because Kara Mitchell had learned that the things worth having rarely came to those who chased them. 6 months passed. East continued to be invisible. Kara continued to wait. And then Clinton Reynolds decided to have some fun. Clinton was a senior analyst who had been with Whitmore for 8 years, long enough to feel ownership over the 12th floor and everyone on it. He was the kind of man who told jokes that weren't funny and expected everyone to laugh anyway. The kind who called the female assistants sweetheart and thought he was being charming. He had disliked East from the first day. Not openly, not in any way that could be reported to HR, but in the small cuts that accumulated over time. The way he talked over East in meetings. The way he forgot to include him in email chains. The way he made comments about diversity hires just loud enough for East to hear. East ignored all of it. He had dealt with men like Clinton his entire career. The best strategy was always the same. Don't react, don't engage, don't give them ammunition. But Clinton was tired of being ignored. It happened on a Friday evening after most of the floor had cleared out. East was packing up his laptop when Clinton appeared at his desk with 2 other analysts, Derek and Paul, trailing behind him like backup singers. "Walker, you heading out already? Come grab a drink with us." East didn't look up. "Can't. Gotta pick up my kid." Always the kid. Clinton leaned against the cubicle wall, arms crossed. "You know I've never seen you do anything fun. 6 months and you're like a ghost around here. I'm here to work. See, that's your problem. You don't network. You don't socialize. How do you expect to move up?" East finally met his eyes. "I'm a contractor, Clinton. There's no moving up." Derek snickered. Clinton smiled the way a shark smiles before it bites. "You know what I think you're scared. Big tough guy like you afraid of a little office politics." He glanced at Derek and Paul, making sure he had an audience. "Tell you what, I've got a challenge for you. A way to prove you've got some guts after all." East should have walked away. Every instinct told him to grab his bag and leave. But something in Clinton's tone made him stay some warning bell that said this was more than just another petty provocation. "What kind of challenge?" Clinton's grin widened. "Kara Mitchell. Ice Queen of the 12th floor. Everyone knows she hasn't had a man in years, probably doesn't know what to do with one anymore." He lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I dare you to make a move on her. See if you can thaw her out." Paul laughed nervously. Derek looked uncomfortable but said nothing. East felt his jaw tighten. "That's not funny. Come on, Walker. Don't tell me you haven't thought about it. She's always watching you in meetings. Maybe she's got a thing for the help." The words hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. East picked up his bag. "I'm leaving." "What's the matter, afraid she'll say yes or afraid she'll have you fired?" Clinton was enjoying himself now. Either way, it'd be entertaining as hell to watch. East walked away without another word, his hands clenched at his sides. He didn't see Clinton pull out his phone. He didn't see the red recording light. He didn't know that the entire conversation had been captured, every word of the dare, every silence that could be interpreted as consideration, every moment that could be edited and twisted into something it wasn't. The trap had been set. 3 days later, East found out. He was in the break room refilling his water bottle when Clinton appeared beside him with that same shark smile. "Hey, Walker, thought you should know something." East kept his eyes on the water cooler. "Not interested?" "Oh, you'll be interested in this." Clinton held up his phone, showing a voice memo file. "Remember our little conversation on Friday? Turns out I hit record by accident. Funny how that happens." East's blood went cold. "Now I'm not saying I'm going to do anything with this," Clinton continued, his voice dripping with false concern. "But if Kara Mitchell ever heard how you were talking about her, how you were considering her little dare, well, who do you think HR would believe, a senior analyst with 8 years of service or a contractor who'll be gone in 6 months anyway?" East turned to face him slowly. "What do you want?" Clinton shrugged. "Nothing. Yet. Just wanted you to know where you stand." He pocketed his phone and headed for the door, then stopped and looked back. "Oh, and Walker. Maybe keep your head down a little lower from now on. Wouldn't want any misunderstandings." He was gone before East could respond. East stood alone in the break room, his mind racing through options. He could go to HR himself, try to get ahead of the narrative. But it would be his word against Clinton's, and the recording existed. He could ignore it, hope Clinton was bluffing. But men like Clinton didn't bluff. They waited for the perfect moment to strike. Or he could do the one thing that went against every survival instinct he'd developed over 35 years. He could tell Kara the truth. That night, after putting Serena to bed, East sat on the edge of his own bed and stared at his phone. His contract with Whitmore was worth $60,000. It was paying for Serena's school, her clothes, the apartment that was finally starting to feel like home. He thought about his daughter, asking why he never talked about work. He thought about all the times he'd taught her to tell the truth even when it was hard. He thought about Kara Mitchell and how he'd spent 6 months pretending not to notice her watching him. The next evening at 7:15, East knocked on the door of Kara's office. She looked up from her computer, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then East stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and you're probably going to want to fire me when I'm done." Kara leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "I'm listening." So East told her everything. The dare, the recording, Clinton's threat. He left nothing out, didn't try to minimize or justify. He simply laid the truth at her feet and waited for the consequences. When he finished, Kara was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled just slightly, like someone finally completing a puzzle they'd been working on for months. "About time you showed up," she said. East blinked. "Excuse me?" Kara stood from her desk and walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. "I've been watching you for 6 months, East. I know exactly who you are and who you aren't. I know Clinton Reynolds has been trying to push you out since day one, and I know why." She turned to face him. "What I didn't know was whether you'd ever trust me enough to come to me directly. Now I do." East felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. "You knew about the dare. I knew something was coming. Men like Clinton are predictable." She walked back toward him, stopping just a few feet away. "What I didn't know was what you would do about it. Whether you'd run or hide or let them control the narrative." She looked at him with those sharp, steady eyes. "You chose to tell me the truth. That's the first time anyone in this building has treated me like a person instead of a position." Her voice softened just barely. "So no, East. I'm not going to fire you, but I am going to give you a choice." "What kind of choice?" "You can walk out of here right now, pretend this conversation never happened, and spend the rest of your contract being invisible. Or you can stay and we can figure out together what to do about Clinton Reynolds and everyone like him." She held his gaze, unflinching. "But I want you to choose because you want to. Not because you're scared and not because you think you owe me something. That's the only way this works." East thought about Serena, about safety, about all the years he'd spent keeping his head down. Then he thought about the way Kara was looking at him like he was something more than a contractor, more than a problem to be managed, more than invisible. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'm staying." Kara nodded once, like she'd expected nothing less. "Good, then we have work to do." "Then we have—" The weeks that followed changed everything and nothing at the same time. On the surface, East Walker's life looked exactly as it had before. He still arrived at Whitmore and Associates 15 minutes early every morning. He still ate lunch alone, still left at exactly 5 o'clock, still picked up Serena from after-school care with minutes to spare. To anyone watching, he was the same invisible contractor he'd always been. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. He and Kara began meeting outside of work, always in places far from the office, always careful. A coffee shop in Lincoln Park. A quiet restaurant in Pilsen. Once a long walk along the lakefront where the November wind cut through their coats and Kara laughed at something he said, a real laugh that transformed her entire face. East hadn't heard her laugh before that night. He hadn't known she could. They talked about everything except work. Kara told him about growing up in a small town in Ohio, the only daughter of a mechanic and a school teacher who had no idea what to do with a girl who read business textbooks for fun. East told her about his grandmother in Detroit, the woman who had raised him after his parents fell apart, who had taught him that dignity wasn't something anyone could give you or take away. He didn't tell her about Serena's mother. Not yet. Some doors stayed closed until the right moment. What surprised East most was how easy it was. He had spent so long keeping everyone at a distance that he'd forgotten what it felt like to be known. Kara didn't treat him like a project or a problem. She treated him like an equal, and somewhere in those stolen hours away from Whitmore and Associates East, began to let his guard down. It terrified him. Serena noticed the change before anyone else did. One Saturday morning, while East was making pancakes, she climbed onto the kitchen counter and watched him with suspicious eyes. "Daddy, you've been smiling a lot lately." East flipped a pancake without looking up. "Is that a crime?" "No, but it's weird." She swung her legs against the cabinet doors. "You only smile like that when something good happens. Like when I got an A on my spelling test." "Maybe I'm just happy." "Are you in love?" The question caught him so off guard that he nearly dropped the spatula. Serena giggled at his expression. "You are. You have a girlfriend." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to. Your face said it." She leaned forward, suddenly serious. "Is she nice? Does she know about me?" East set down the spatula and turned to face his daughter. "Yes, she's nice. And yes, she knows about you. She knows you're the most important person in my life." Serena considered this for a moment. "Good. Because if she's mean, I won't like her." East laughed the sound, surprising even himself. "Fair enough." "Daddy," Serena's voice went soft. "I just want you to be happy. You work so hard all the time. You deserve someone who makes you smile." East felt something tighten in his chest. 8 years old, and she understood more than most adults he knew. "Come here," he said, and she jumped off the counter into his arms. For a moment, holding his daughter in the morning light of their small kitchen, East let himself believe that maybe things could work out. Maybe he could have this, the job, the woman, the life he'd never dared to imagine. He should have known better. 3 weeks after that Saturday morning, Kara revealed something that changed his understanding of everything. They were sitting in her car after dinner, parked on a quiet street in Wicker Park, when she turned to him with an expression he'd never seen before. It was vulnerability, carefully controlled, but unmistakable. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to hear all of it before you react." East nodded, his stomach tightening. 6 months ago, before you even started at Whitmore, I received a warning from a colleague I trust. Someone in the company was building a case against me. Not anything official. Nothing that would hold up in court, but the kind of whisper campaign that destroys careers. They wanted my position, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get it. She looked out the windshield at the empty street. I started preparing, documenting everything, building a file of every questionable decision, every policy violation, every instance of harassment that HR had conveniently overlooked. I knew that eventually whoever was coming for me would make a move, and I wanted to be ready. East waited, sensing there was more. When you started on the sustainability project, I noticed you immediately. Not because of anything inappropriate, but because you were different. You didn't play the games everyone else played. You didn't suck up to the executives or throw your colleagues under the bus to get ahead. You just did your job with more integrity than anyone I'd seen in years. She turned to face him. And I noticed the way Clinton Reynolds targeted you. The comments, the exclusion, the constant grinding campaign to make you feel like you didn't belong. It was the same thing I'd been dealing with for 20 years, just dressed up differently. East felt a cold realization spreading through him. You knew about the dare before I told you. Kara nodded. I didn't know the specifics, but I knew Clinton was planning something. He's too connected to the people who want me gone for it to be coincidence. You were never really the target, East. You were just a weapon they thought they could use against me. The words hit him like a punch to the chest. So when I came to your office that night when I told you everything, I already knew something was coming, Kara finished. What I didn't know was whether you would come to me on your own or whether you would let them control you. That's what I was waiting for. Not because I wanted to test you, but because I needed to know if you were someone I could trust. East sat in silence, processing. Part of him felt manipulated. Part of him understood. And part of him recognized something he hadn't wanted to admit. Kara had been fighting her own invisible war this entire time, and she had chosen him as her ally. So, what now? He asked finally. Kara reached into her bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. Now we stop being defensive and start being strategic. Everything Clinton has on you, I have 10 times worse on him and his friends. But I'm not going to use it unless you're with me. This has to be a choice, East. Your choice. She held out the folder. East looked at it for a long moment, then he took it from her hands. I'm with you. Kara's smile was small but real. Then let's get to work. But Clinton moved faster than either of them anticipated. 2 weeks later, East was called into a meeting with Human Resources. The HR director was a thin woman named Patricia Holloway with reading glasses perched on her nose and a practiced expression of neutral concern. Sitting beside her was a man East recognized from legal, and in the corner taking notes was Clinton Reynolds himself. East felt his heart sink the moment he walked in. Mr. Walker, thank you for coming, Patricia said, gesturing to an empty chair. Please have a seat. East sat, keeping his face carefully blank. We've received a complaint regarding your conduct with a senior executive. Patricia continued, sliding a document across the table. Specifically, allegations of an inappropriate relationship with Ms. Kara Mitchell. East looked at the document. It was a formal complaint filed by Clinton, complete with the audio recording and a carefully constructed timeline of suspicious interactions between East and Kara. Every coffee break, every meeting that ran long, every time they had been seen speaking in the hallway, all of it twisted into evidence of something sordid. We take these matters very seriously, Patricia said. The recording suggests that you were challenged to pursue Ms. Mitchell romantically, and your subsequent behavior indicates that you may have acted on that challenge. East could feel Clinton watching him from the corner, barely containing his satisfaction. I'd like to respond to these allegations. East said, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. Patricia nodded. Of course. That's why we're here. First, the recording was made without my knowledge or consent, which I believe violates company policy regarding workplace surveillance. Second, the conversation captured was a dare initiated by Mr. Reynolds, not something I participated in willingly. And third, Mr. Walker, Patricia interrupted, the content of the recording is concerning regardless of how it was obtained. You can clearly be heard discussing a potential relationship with Ms. Mitchell. Whether or not you acted on it, the fact that such a conversation took place raises serious questions about your professionalism. East opened his mouth to respond, but Clinton cut in smoothly. Patricia, if I may. He stood crossing his arms with theatrical concern. I want to be clear that I didn't file this complaint to harm Mr. Walker. I filed it because I was genuinely worried about Ms. Mitchell. She's a respected leader in this company, and the idea that someone might be taking advantage of her position— No one is taking advantage of anyone. The voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Kara Mitchell standing there, her expression cold enough to freeze the room. Ms. Mitchell, Patricia said, clearly flustered. This is an HR matter. You shouldn't be here. When the HR matter involves false accusations against me and my staff, I absolutely should be here. Kara walked into the room and closed the door behind her. I've heard enough to understand what's happening. Mr. Reynolds filed a complaint based on an illegally obtained recording, manipulated evidence, and personal animosity. I'd like the opportunity to present my own documentation before any conclusions are drawn. Patricia exchanged an uncertain glance with the man from legal. That's not standard procedure. Neither is allowing the complainant to sit in on the investigation of his own complaint. Kara's gaze landed on Clinton, who had gone very still. But here we are. The room fell silent. Patricia cleared her throat. Perhaps we should adjourn and reconvene once we've had a chance to review all relevant materials. Perhaps you should, Kara agreed. And while you're reviewing, I suggest you take a close look at the complete audio file from that evening, not the edited version Mr. Reynolds submitted. I have a copy obtained through proper channels that tells a very different story. She looked at East, and something passed between them, a silent acknowledgement that the battle had begun. "This meeting is over," Patricia said finally. "We'll be in touch." East stood and walked out without looking at Clinton. Kara followed a moment later, and they didn't speak until they reached the empty stairwell at the end of the hall. "That was risky," East said quietly, walking in there like that. "It was necessary." Kara leaned against the wall, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "They were about to railroad you, and I wasn't going to let that happen. But now they know about us, about whatever this is." Kara met his eyes. "East, they were always going to find out. The only question was whether we controlled the narrative or let Clinton control it. I chose option 1. East thought about Serena, about the contract that was paying for her school, her clothes, their apartment, about everything he stood to lose. What happens now? Kara straightened her armor, sliding back into place. Now we wait for the review, and we prepare for whatever comes next. She reached out and touched his arm just briefly. You're not alone in this. You need to remember that. East wanted to believe her. But as he watched her walk away, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of something he couldn't control. That night, he sat outside Serena's school for a long time before going in to pick her up. She came running out with her backpack, bouncing, her smile bright and unsuspecting. "Daddy, guess what I got picked to be the narrator in the class play?" East forced a smile. "That's amazing, baby girl. I'm so proud of you." In the car on the way home, Serena chattered about rehearsals and costumes while East tried to focus on her words instead of the weight pressing down on his chest. If he lost this contract, he lost everything. If his reputation was destroyed, it would follow him to every job interview, every new opportunity. And Serena would grow up knowing that her father had been branded as someone who crossed lines, who didn't know his place. His phone buzzed. A text from Kara. "You're thinking about running, I can tell. Don't." He stared at the message for a long moment. Another text followed. "If you run, they win, and Serena will grow up thinking that running is the answer." East closed his eyes. She was right. He knew she was right. But knowing and doing were two different things. "Daddy!" Serena's voice cut through his thoughts. "Are you okay?" East looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror, her worried eyes, her small face that trusted him to have all the answers. "Yeah, baby," he said softly. "I'm okay, just thinking about work stuff." "Is someone being mean to you?" The question was so direct, so innocent that East almost laughed. "Something like that." Serena nodded solemnly. "You always tell me that when someone's mean, I should tell a teacher. Did you tell someone?" East thought about Kara standing in that doorway, stepping into the fire without hesitation. "Yeah," he said. "I did." "Good." Serena settled back in her seat, satisfied. "Then it'll be okay. The truth always wins. You taught me that." East gripped the steering wheel and made a decision. He wasn't going to run. He wasn't going to hide. He was going to stand and fight, not because he was brave, but because his daughter was watching, and he refused to teach her that surrender was the only option. The next morning, he walked into Whitmore and Associates with his head held high. Whatever came next, he would face it. The review took 5 days. 5 days of East walking through the halls of Whitmore and Associates while conversations stopped and eyes followed him. 5 days of Clinton Reynolds sitting in his cubicle with the smug confidence of a man who believed he had already won. 5 days of Kara maintaining her professional distance in public while sending East quiet texts at night, reminding him to breathe, to wait, to trust the process. On the morning of the 6th day, East received an email from Patricia Holloway requesting his presence in the main conference room at 2 o'clock. He spent the hours until then finishing his sustainability report, the same work he'd been doing for 6 months now, the work that had brought him into this building and into Kara's orbit. Whatever happened at 2 o'clock, at least the report would be complete. At least he would leave something behind that mattered. At 1:55, he walked into the conference room. Patricia Holloway sat at the head of the long table flanked by the man from legal and 2 executives East didn't recognize. Clinton Reynolds was already seated on one side, his expression carefully neutral, but unable to fully hide the anticipation beneath. Derek and Paul were notably absent, and in the corner, standing rather than sitting, was Kara Mitchell. Patricia looked up as East entered. "Mr. Walker, please have a seat." East sat across from Clinton, keeping his posture straight and his face calm. He had learned a long time ago that showing fear only gave people permission to hurt you. "We've completed our review of the complaint filed by Mr. Reynolds." Patricia began adjusting her reading glasses. "We've examined the audio recording, conducted interviews with relevant parties, and reviewed all documentation submitted by both sides." She opened a folder in front of her, and East noticed it was thick with papers. "The original recording submitted by Mr. Reynolds was edited. The complete file which Ms. Mitchell provided reveals that the conversation in question was initiated by Mr. Reynolds as a deliberate provocation. Mr. Walker did not participate in the so-called dare, and in fact explicitly rejected it before leaving the scene." Clinton shifted in his seat. "That's not entirely accurate. The recording clearly shows—" "Mr. Reynolds." Patricia's voice went sharp. "You'll have your opportunity to speak. Right now I'm presenting our findings." Clinton fell silent, but the color was rising in his face. Patricia continued. "Additionally, our investigation revealed that the recording was made without Mr. Walker's knowledge or consent, which violates company policy regarding workplace privacy. Mr. Reynolds, you were aware of this policy when you were hired, and you signed documentation acknowledging your understanding of it." She pulled out another document. "Furthermore, Ms. Mitchell submitted a file containing 3 previous complaints against Mr. Reynolds from other employees, all alleging harassment and bullying behavior. These complaints were filed over the past 4 years and were apparently never fully investigated by this department." One of the executives East didn't recognize leaned forward, frowning. Patricia looked distinctly uncomfortable. "That's a separate matter that will be addressed internally," she said quickly. "But it is relevant to establishing a pattern of behavior." East glanced at Kara. Her expression revealed nothing, but he could see the tension in her shoulders the way her hands were clasped tightly in front of her. "Based on our findings," Patricia said, "we have concluded that Mr. Walker did not engage in any inappropriate conduct. The complaint filed against him is without merit and will not be entered into his personnel file." East felt the breath he'd been holding release from his chest. However, Patricia's gaze moved to Kara. "Ms. Mitchell, we need to address the nature of your relationship with Mr. Walker. You've indicated that a personal relationship exists between you. Is that correct?" The room went very still. Kara stepped forward from her position in the corner, moving to stand beside the table where everyone could see her clearly. "Yes," she said. "It is correct." Clinton made a small sound of triumph. "Ms. Mitchell," the executive East didn't recognize, spoke up. "You understand the implications of this admission. Mr. Walker is a contractor under your supervision. A personal relationship creates a conflict of interest that could expose the company to significant liability." Kara nodded. "I understand the implications perfectly. I've worked in corporate environments for 20 years, and I know exactly how this looks on paper. A female executive and a black male contractor. The whispers have already started. Some people in this room probably already have their conclusions drawn." She looked directly at Clinton as she said it, and he had the decency to look away. "But here's what I need this committee to understand." Kara's voice was steady, but something underneath it was raw and real. "East Walker came to my office 7 weeks ago and told me the truth about the situation with Mr. Reynolds. He didn't have to do that. He could have ignored it, covered it up, or tried to handle it on his own. Instead, he walked into my office knowing it might cost him his contract, his reputation, everything he'd worked for, and he told me the truth anyway." She turned to look at East, and for a moment the armor she always wore seemed to fall away. "In 20 years of corporate leadership, I have never had anyone treat me with that kind of respect. Not because of my position, but in spite of it. East Walker is honest, he is principled, and he is braver than anyone in this room, including me." She turned back to the committee, her voice strengthening. "So yes, I have feelings for him. I'm not going to apologize for that. If having feelings for a good man is a fireable offense, then fire me. But you should know that if you do, I'll walk out of here with my integrity intact. Can everyone at this table say the same? The silence that followed was absolute. Patricia Holloway looked at the executives, who looked at each other, who looked at the man from legal. No one seemed to know what to say. Finally, the executive who had questioned Kara spoke. Ms. Mitchell, no one is suggesting that you be terminated. We simply need to ensure that proper protocols are followed going forward. Kara nodded once. Then let me suggest a protocol. East Walker's contract ends in 3 weeks. After that, he will no longer be under my supervision and any conflict of interest will be resolved. Until then, I will recuse myself from any decisions regarding his work. His reports will go directly to operations oversight. She looked at Patricia. Is that acceptable? Patricia seemed relieved to have a solution offered. That seems reasonable. Legal, any objections? The man from legal shook his head. Then I think we're done here. Patricia closed her folder and stood. Mr. Walker, you're free to continue your work. Mr. Reynolds, please remain behind. We have additional matters to discuss regarding your conduct. Clinton's face went pale. East stood and walked toward the door, resisting the urge to look back at the man who had tried to destroy him. As he passed Kara, their eyes met briefly, and she gave him the smallest nod. It was over. They had won. But East knew better than to think that winning came without cost. 3 weeks later, East Walker walked out of Whitmore and Associates for the last time. His contract was complete, his final report submitted, his badge surrendered to security. Clinton Reynolds had been suspended pending a full investigation into his conduct, and the whisper campaign against Kara had quietly dissolved once it became clear that the people behind it had lost their most useful weapon. East had kept his distance from Kara during those final weeks, partly because of the protocol she'd established, and partly because he needed time to process everything that had happened. For 6 months, he had been invisible. Now suddenly he was visible in ways he'd never anticipated, and he wasn't sure yet what that meant. Serena was waiting for him outside her school when he pulled up her narrator costume for the class play clutched in her hands. Daddy, look, my costume came today. She held up a sparkly cape that was slightly too big for her. That's beautiful, baby girl. East helped her into the car and buckled her seatbelt. You're going to be the best narrator that school has ever seen. Are you coming to the show? It's next Friday. I wouldn't miss it for anything. Serena studied his face with those perceptive eyes of hers. You look different today, Daddy. Like you're not worried anymore. East smiled. Maybe I'm not. Did the mean person at work get in trouble? He thought about Clinton Reynolds sitting alone in that conference room, realizing too late that he had underestimated everyone around him. Yeah, baby, he did. Serena nodded with satisfaction. Good. I told you the truth always wins. That evening, after Serena was asleep, East sat on his front steps and looked up at the Chicago sky, too bright with city lights to show many stars. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he knew who it was before he looked. There's a coffee shop in Lincoln Park, Kara's text read. The one where you made me laugh so hard I snorted. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. No more protocols. East smiled and typed back, I'll be there. The next morning, he walked into the coffee shop and found Kara already seated at a corner table. She looked different outside the context of Whitmore and Associates, softer, somehow less armored. When she saw him, she smiled, and it reached all the way to her eyes. East sat down across from her, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then Kara reached into her bag and pulled out something small. She set it on the table between them. It was a key. East looked at it, then at her. It's not a proposal, Kara said quickly. And it's not a promise of forever. It's just an option. A door that's open if you want to walk through it. East picked up the key and turned it over in his fingers. It was warm from being in her bag, ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. You know my life is complicated, he said. Serena comes first. Always. Kara nodded. I know. That's one of the things I respect most about you. East looked at her across the table. This woman who had waited for him, fought for him, risked her career for him. This woman who had seen him when he was trying so hard to be invisible. "Okay," he said quietly. Kara's eyes widened slightly. "Okay. Okay." He put the key in his pocket and reached across the table to take her hand. "But you should know Serena has very high standards. She already told me that if you're mean, she won't like her." Kara laughed that same real laugh he'd heard on their walk by the lake. "Then I better be on my best behavior." East squeezed her hand, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he let himself believe that he deserved this. Not because he had earned it, not because he had fought for it, but simply because he had been brave enough to show up. Sometimes he thought the scariest thing wasn't crossing a line. It was believing you were worth waiting for. And that's East and Kara's story. A reminder that sometimes the people who see us most clearly are the ones we least expect. If this story touched you, let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you'll be here when the next story drops. Until then, take care of yourselves.